Pat, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
Well, why don't we just dive in by maybe having you share a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're up to as a coach.
All right. Well, I guess diving in is a good metaphor because so a little bit about myself. So my life has been always about, from a very young age, wanting to help people that I met in my stratosphere or whatever believe in themselves more or overcome stuff. And so I ended up being a psychologist. And I wasn't planning to be a psychologist. I was just planning to study psychology. So my degrees were in humanistic and transpersonal psychology, master's and doctorate. So I wasn't planning to do Freud. I'm an anti-Freud, analytical, dogmatic diagnosis. I don't believe in that stuff. So I was introduced early on to people like Maslow and Rogers and Jung and blah, blah, blah. So I was a psychologist for a few years, and now I call myself a recovered psychologist, not because of the clients I had or the patients, but because of the system in America of using medical diagnosis and so on. I discovered coaching in 1990 when I was hired to coach executives at Hewlett-Packard, Kodak, IBM, et cetera. And then when the coaching movement started in 95, I was one of the first charter members of the ICF and kind of just took off from there.
So I want to go back. So 1990, you started coaching.
Yes.
Take me back to that moment. What was it? And by that time, you were already a practicing psychologist. You had in private practice?
Yeah, for 12 years, yes.
What was the inspiration to pivot into coaching?
Well, I actually was hired by a company in Fort Collins called The People Business, and we were doing team building training with Hewlett-Packard and IBM executives. They'd go away for a weekend, they'd come back, and they're all excited. And the woman who owned the company quickly realized that unless they had a coach for the highest level decision maker of that team, they wouldn't succeed in implementing whatever changes they got excited about, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I was hired as a executive coach 10 hours a week for The People Business to coach executives 3 months prior to and 3 months after a team building engagement. Mm-hmm. And then I also was sent executives, back in the day, we called it remedial coaching. They were sent for coaching or else. they had to turn their job around or else. And nowadays, of course, we know it's usually high performance coaching, skill building, relationship enhancement, et cetera. But that's what I was doing 10 hours a week. And then I still had a psychotherapy practice on the side.
And so what was the journey from then back in the early 90s to now? How has your coaching practice evolved, and are you still doing the psychotherapy?
No. 96, I closed my therapy practice totally. I mean, I learned about coaching in 95. I went to the first Coach University conference, which became the first International Coach Federation conference in 95. And then I went to like 15 straight all around the world. I mean, all over the United States, Canada, Europe. I was a coaching groupie. I just really loved that it was developing as a profession. So in 96, I closed my therapy practice, went full-time into coaching, and then I moved to Florida. So I had a new relationship, a new town, a new career, and I had to build it from scratch because I was pretty well known in Loveland, Colorado, and people hired me for a few months. But after that, coach clients don't stay with you forever usually. So I had to learn to market myself differently.
Got it. What drew you into coaching? And so you closed your therapy practice. What was it about coaching that made you want to make that what you were doing?
I was always coach-like as a therapist. I always wanted to be someone who believed in the person who sat in front of me with whatever angst or wounds or stories or narrative they had. And even if they might be severely, I treated PTSD soldiers, wreck survivors, crash survivors, incest survivors, etc. But I always looked at the human part of them. Like, all right, so this happened, and who are you besides that? So I was like coaching to find their best self. And I know that's a trite phrase, but I believe everybody comes with a unique purpose or two or three. And despite what happens to us due to life circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
who are you and who do you want to become? And who does your, actually, I had a friend say once, it's not what do I want for my life, but what does life want for me? And so I started to use that question. What does life want for me?
Mm.
And what am I compelled? What am I drawn to? And so that's how I got into helping people realize life beyond mediocrity, is the way I put it.
Mm. And so from working with execs, how else did your coaching practice evolve? As I understand, you actually have a coaching school, a life
Yes.
coaching school. Is that right?
I did. I sold it. But
okay.
So that evolution was, I finally realized that all coaching was life coaching, even though you may not put life coach on your card because you wouldn't get hired by Hewlett Packard. But we coach the whole person. So the executives would talk about stresses they had at home with their teenage daughter or their spouse or their weight or their health or whatever. And at work, it impacted that. So I started taking a whole person approach to that. And that got enhanced in the coach training that was out there. But when I went to Coach University, which was a great school, and I took training at CTI and Newfield Network. I mean, I dabbled in a lot of them that were out there in the early days. I quickly learned that a therapist trained didn't need a 12-week course on how to listen or how to be ethical or how to be confidential. We already knew that. We were trained in that. So my school, the Institute for Life Coach Training, was started in 1998. And we specialized in graduate degree professionals in the human services like psychology, human relations, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And I sold that school in 2012 because I was tired of the administration.
Got it. And so now as you think about how you coach, how would you describe your coaching style? I know this is sort of a weird question, but how would you describe the flavor of how you engage with someone, let's say one-on-one?
It's not really weird. I've kind of gone back to my roots and said, look, you studied humanistic and transpersonal psychology, which was about positive human growth. The transpersonal is beyond personal, the transformational. So I coach people who are up to big things and ready to move fast. That's what I put on my website. So it doesn't have to be a lawyer or an entrepreneur or an executive. It can be anybody who is ready to redesign their future and not get over their past. It's like, so I guess it's, when I say it's transformational, it's who do you need to become to get what you want? What do you need to do differently to be who you need to be? Mm-hmm. What is it you really truthfully want under the surface? So my coaching is about depth, not personal archaeology like a therapist might go to, but the depth of what's under the surface of what's bubbling up for you. What could coaching get for you that you haven't shared with somebody else? New thinking, new perspectives, new ways of designing what you want to create in life.
And over the past 28 years, since 1990, you've probably learned a whole bunch of stuff that you probably wish you knew in 1990.
Yeah.
What are a couple of things that you wish you knew when you first started that you now know about coaching?
I wish I wasn't so technique-y as I was back then. I mean, I used my early coaching. I used what in psychology we call a genogram. I would meet with people and we do a family diagram: who you're married to, who are your parents or your kids, your family of origin. It's like I was getting too much into who they were rather than who they are. So I wouldn't do that now.
Can you just tell me more about that, who they were? Like, draw out that distinction.
Well, today I ask people to write me a life story, whatever they want that to be. And I've had poetry, I've had 50 sheets of butcher paper, I've had artistic endeavors. Just tell me what you want me to know about you that you would call your life story. It's not a psychological summary or a social narrative that we would talk about in psychotherapy. It's your narrative. Who are you? Who have you been? What's important for me to know? Back in the old days, when I was doing executive coaching as a trained psychologist, I looked at family history. What were your beliefs when you grew up? Who were your parents? How were you raised? That's not important in coaching now. It's more like, who are you now and how do you want to change what you're trying to create?
Hmm.
So the who may change with the what that they want, but and probably will. If you can imagine a triangle, so the bottom, the abscissa or whatever you call this bottom part, is be and do and have, right? So this corner is do, this corner is have, and the pinnacle is be. Most people come to coaching for do something different, have something different, do something less, have something more. But eventually we have to get to the be. Who are you? Who do you want to become? Who is your being? And I call that coaching from the inside out.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. Sounds like an important distinction. And as you think about the other aspect of your background, just knowing a little bit about you, you've been involved with the ICF for quite a while.
Yeah, from its inception. Yeah,
from its inception. I'd love to hear from you. People listening to this may or may not be credentialed. They might be wondering, what is ICF? Should I get involved? I mean, for you, what is it that made you want to get in, help create the ICF really? And why did that matter or still matter to you today?
Well, that's interesting because I just came back from a trip to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I went through Angel Fire, New Mexico, where the first ICF administration office address was. When we started the ICF in 1996, a President Jeff had his address at a ski resort in Angel Fire, New Mexico. Those were the headquarters of the 242 members of the ICF back then. Now there's 40,000 members worldwide. So I think I'm thrilled that it's become more than I ever imagined. I wasn't so worried about it becoming a credentialing body. And I still fight that today. Can you be a membership body and also a credentialing body? I think that's a little bit, I hate to use the word, but a little bit incestuous. Mm-hmm. And I think the ICF is trying to separate those even stronger. That credentialing is over here, marketing and publicity of the profession and membership is over here. But I think for people getting into this, new to Denver, new to coaching, the ICF is a great organization to be part of because it makes coaching so much more visible than it was when I started. Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to be the people that said, "Hi, I'm a coach." They go, "Really? What sport?" Nowadays, I don't think people get asked that much. Coaching is pretty prevalent and, it's ubiquitous. I mean, a lot of people know that it's a profession. They may not know exactly how coaching works. Mm-hmm. But the ICF is out there being visible and marketing. They don't yet have ads on the Super Bowl like ASTD does, but a Society for Training and Development. But I think it's good. And the ICF chapter in Denver is a good appendage of ICF Global.
For you personally, like what do you get out of being a member of ICF Colorado and what we're doing here?
Well, so I was one of the first 24 MCCs way back in the day because when I had that job with People Business, I was coaching 10 hours a week. So I easily had 2,500 hours of coaching when I created my portfolio back in 1999. I think I got my MCC. And then when chapters started developing, I actually helped start the first Coach Colorado chapter in Fort Collins. We called ourselves the back porch gang. There were 12 of us meeting on somebody's back porch. ICF chapters now are so supported by ICF Global, and the fact that people from all over the state can either come to Denver to a meeting or partake in virtual discussions like this, virtual webinars. It's a great avenue for learning, for creating camaraderie and culture. And it's not like in the old days when you would come to a meeting and you want to ask the seasoned coaches, how do you get clients? Everybody wants to know that, but now it's much more than that. It's skill building, it's community building, it's fabulous discussions both online and in real time.
And so, as you mentioned, skill building, I'm curious for you, just as we wrap up our conversation, you're an MCC, you've been coaching for a while, but where are you personally exploring and deepening your own skill as a coach or in any other dimension?
Well, that's a great question because I need to do a webinar on what is mastery. I'm a master coach, but I'm not always masterful. So I may not always be up to par. Funny phrase, because I was watching the Masters golf tournament, and not every golfer is always up to par or under par. So I think what I get is stimulated by when I come to sessions or I take part in the online chats. My skills, who was it that said you always need to sharpen your saw? The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Who wrote that?
Covey or Blanchard or one of those.
Covey. So you always need to sharpen your saw. So I'm always sharpening my saw. What can I learn differently? What can I learn unique? What I'm doing today is partly working. I'm 69 years old. I still want to work as a purpose, but I coach Navy SEALs on their return to do career coaching. It's kind of a give back. I get paid, but minimally. I'm coaching federal prisoners that I taught years ago, the coaching skills when they were in prison. Now they're out. So I'm doing a mentor group with former prisoners, formerly incarcerated citizens. And then I coach other people who might just hear about me and show up. Mostly I'm mentor coaching people who are going for their certification. I'm a certified assessor with the ICF, and I love mentor coaching in groups. And then I've created an online platform for a course that people can take either to help their coaching or for their clients to use for their own behest.
And if people would like to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
Yeah, brand new. I mean, it's not a new website, but it's to be totally revamped in the days to come. drpatwilliams.com, drpatwilliams.com.
Okay.
And then the program that you'll see linked on that program is called gettingnakedprogram.com. That is about emotional honesty and getting deeper in coaching. So you'll see, and there's some free downloads on there, but drpatwilliams.com will find me everywhere.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your background. I appreciate all that you've done to help the SEALs and the people getting out of jail to lead a better life, and look forward to seeing you at a future event.
Yep. Thank you, Robbie. Great job with us. Thank you much.
Okay.